I don't know what I'm going to say to Josh and Cady when I'm going to tell them no one showed up for their lecture. Well, welcome to this evening's very special event that combines an artist and an astronaut. Who says that art and science don't go hand in hand? Actually, to be precise, I should say glass and space. Josh and Cady's interests meet in exploration. Many of us at the museum are familiar with Josh's work in glass. He has lectured here several times, and most know him as the source of the museum's amazing 108-pound megaplanet. This beautiful glass world is on view in the museum's modern glass gallery. I was a witness to its creation, and I have to say, I have seen a lot of glass being made, but I will never forget that experience. For those of you who don't know Josh, and I'm sure there's maybe one or two, he creates a range of vessels and sculptures in glass, all of which in some way can be related to his love of the night sky, space, nature, glass, and glass history. And I hope that a lot of you will see the display of his glass in our glass market. It looks really beautiful. It's nice to see a lot of work brought out. My favorite project, and one that I think is Josh's most important legacy, is his Infinity Project, which you will undoubtedly hear about tonight, undoubtedly. This is a worldwide activity requiring many helpers who hide Josh's small glass planets all over the Earth, from the highest mountains to the deepest oceans. His planets have even orbited the Earth because, let's face it, he has an in there. I admire the Infinity Project for its ambition, its mystery, its lunacy, and its poetry. Josh has been working with glass for over 40 years. He has had numerous museum shows nationally and internationally, and his work is owned by collectors and museums worldwide. He has a long list of accomplishments, but one that I think is especially important is his involvement with surf. In 1985, he founded and was the first president of the Craft Emergency Relief Fund, or CERF, a national foundation dedicated to helping craft artists who have suffered a disaster that prevents them from making a living. This nonprofit organization, which is headquartered in Montpelier, Vermont, has helped many hundreds of artists, especially after storms like Irene and Katrina. CERF also helped an artist whose documentary was presented here last month, who is Jenny Ruffner. Josh's unique and always changing glass planets are representations in miniature of the huge planet that Cady Coleman, his astronaut wife, has spent a career trying to get off of. Cady loves to be in space. I like the feeling of Earth under my feet. Cady craves air. A graduate of MIT and the University of Massachusetts, where she received her doctorate in polymer science and engineering, Cady is a retired U.S. Air Force colonel. She joined NASA in 1992, so this year marks her 20th anniversary of working with outer space. In order to serve on NASA's missions, which are highly competitive, Cady has undergone all kinds of rigorous training, including living in a capsule 300 feet underwater for several months. She has logged more than 4,300 hours aboard the Space Shuttle Columbia and the International Space Station, where she recently spent 6 months. To be honest, Cady is not for the faint of heart. I have been looking forward to Josh and Cady's presentation for weeks, and I'm sure many of you have also. So please, let's welcome tonight's very accomplished artist and astronaut. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. We're going to talk in turn, and I'm going to go first because have you ever tried to go after an astronaut? So I will just start my talk and then hand it over to you.
Okay.
In a little while.
Sounds good to me. I mean, if we live together every night, every day, we might actually have a talk where he did one slide and I did another one. But we think we're actually doing pretty well to sort of be on the same stage together.
And you're going to be sitting over there, right?
Maybe.
Because she makes faces and does all sorts of stuff that I don't want her behind me while I'm talking.
I have a microphone.
Okay.
You're dead.
Okay. You can still hear me away from the mics. Okay. I don't know. Can I press this? I'm trying. Okay, it'll become alive soon, right? Yes. No. Scott, if I press this, can you make it? Okay. I sometimes don't know what it is or why glass is held my attention for so long, for more than 40 years now. What is about this stuff that, okay, there's just a little lag here. What is it about this material? Is it the color, or is it the heat? Scott, can I control these from here too, without this thing? I'm sorry, you guys. It's just, or can it be made to go faster? It's something I'm doing, right? I have to bite this. No? Okay. All right, here we go. So what is it? Is it the fire? Is it the flame? Is it just the pure heat of this material? Glass is an alchemic blend of sand and metallic oxides combined with extraordinary blinding heat. The result is a material that flows and drips like primordial lava. It possesses an inner light and transcendent radiant heat. It responds only to gravity and centrifugal force or centripetal force. It's this transcendent radiant heat make it simultaneously one of the most fascinating materials to work with and one of the most outlandishly frustrating materials for an artist to work with. And I think that's what it is. I think the fact that it is just so impossible to do this is what keeps me interested in it. And the fact that when you actually make something that works, it's so rewarding. It's so incredible. I took it as a good omen when I moved to this farm in Massachusetts in 1976. I took it as a good omen. I found several handmade little marbles outside the kitchen door in the flower beds. And when I brought them in to my kitchen and washed them off, they were just as bright and beautiful as the sunny afternoon they went missing, maybe 70 years before. And it actually made me think about the longevity of glass at that these little marbles could last so long under the earth made me think about the fact that glass in museums often arrive there not because of collectors, but because it was dug up by archaeologists somewhere. The other thing that happened when I moved to Shelburne was that one of the school teachers from the Franklin County school system asked me if I'd be willing to demonstrate glassmaking to all the 8th graders in the county. It seemed like a kind of an easy thing to do, only I didn't realize that there were, in fact, zillions of 8th graders in Franklin County, and I'd inadvertently agreed to give a glass demonstration every Wednesday afternoon for the last week of January, all of February, March, April, May, and the first week of June. Now, I don't know if any of you have ever known an eighth grader. These are people who will suffer no boredom whatsoever in their lives. And so, by the way, I'm just showing you scenes of my studio and my home. There's tonight, unfortunately it's rainy, but tonight there's going to be an aurora that I think will be amazing. But we see them relatively, well, not that often, but from time to time. At any rate, 8th graders were not even the slightest bit interested in me making wine goblets or vases or bottles or bowls or platters. It was boring. And one night, before they came the next day, I was trying to think of what to do for them that would be entrancing or interesting. And I thought about the Apollo program, and actually more specifically, this photograph that the Apollo astronauts took on their way rounding the moon in 1969, and Jim Lovell looked out the triangular window of his spacecraft and said, "I can cover the Earth with my thumb." And of course you can, if you're the right distance and the right perspective from our world that seems so limitless and big. But at the time in the 1970s, I don't know, I just thought it would be nice to make a little planet for these kids, a marble, essentially, that they could hold in their hand. So that's what I began to do. And what's amazing about these objects is that they have the ability, it's funny, I've made them for a long time now, and some of them are small, and some of them are very complicated, some of them are large. But one thing I've discovered is that they bring, children love them, but so do adults that are, they transcend culture, and they transcend language, and they transcend distance, and perhaps even they'll transcend time, that some of them will survive for hundreds of years, or maybe longer. It's the Josh Simpson Sphere Museum. But here's the Vermont studio. Pretty nice, huh? And I had two partners, and because they were paying the bulk of the rent, they were the heavy lifters in that they got the tar paper shack behind the studio. I, on the other hand, I have some. These are amazing that I have these old photos. This is my teepee, really a wonderful dwelling. This is, I started to make goblets. Somebody did this nice woodcut of me then. And anyway, so here's examples of my early work, two perfectly matched ruby wine goblets. And you guys laugh, but these were perfectly matched in my book. I continued making goblets for another 16 years maybe. I haven't made them for now 26 years. And I wish I'd saved some, because at Sotheby's and on eBay they're worth a fortune. These are modern photographs of older work. And so this is what I was interested in doing at the time. I loved Frederick Carter and Steuben, and of course Louis Tiffany. But when I actually have these are close-ups of the landscapes on my planets. But I wanted you to see this little goblet. This really actually affected my life in a big way. It's a little goblet that was found in the Middle East, and I'll tell the story of this goblet, but keep it in mind. They found these little goblets all over the Middle East, but they were really little, like tiny. And none of the archaeologists could figure out what they were for. Were they for religious purposes? Were they used in services? Were they used for unguents or makeup or medical things? No one really could figure it out. This is the Brahmaputra river valley in northern India, and river valleys on my planet. This is a river valley in the southwest of the United States. And this is a little further afield. This is on Mars. And a dry planet surface on one of mine. Anyway, archaeologists just could not figure out what they were. And they were too small to drink out of. And so it was Dr. Brill, Robert Brill, who was in Herat, Afghanistan in the 70s. And he was either I've heard two stories. One is that he was in the marketplace and saw these for sale, but he later had a glassblower explain to him what they were for. These are extinct volcanoes on a planet's surface. And you can see a row of geosynchronous communication satellites. Well, it turned out that these little goblets were for water and bird seed in a bird cage. And of course, birds were kept all through the Middle East, but the reed cages had long ago been lost or fallen apart, but the glass remained, of course. And thinking of that, and thinking of these planets that I was making for kids, and at the time when I began to make planets, thinking about the fact that no museums, no collectors, no galleries had my work or were even vaguely interested in my work, made me think that maybe the archaeologists were my only hope. That if I started to hide my planets somewhere or other, that archaeologists would find them, and I'd eventually get into a museum somewhere. So this is where I hid my first planet on Cooper Lane Road near my house on my bike route in a stone wall, and that planet is still there. And then as I traveled further and further away from home, I would bring planets with me and hide them. So this is with my now 28-year-old son Josiah. We had just bought a bridge in San Francisco, and we thought to commemorate it, we put a planet at the foot. But then as I began to be more refined in my hiding, I began to think, well, if you want archaeologists to find things, you should really go where archaeologists go. And that is how planets ended up throughout Meso and Central America and Mexico. And then for a couple of years, I had a project to put planets not in castles, but in the moats around castles, because that, of course, is where archaeologists would likely go. And another project to put them in sacred places around the world, not just archaeological sites, but in Buddhist temples in Japan and other places. And then I thought, well, what about industrial sites? And so this is Bethlehem Steel. This is harder to get through this fence than you would think. And then I started thinking about stone works, and I found this stone work outside of Rome, and I thought, this would be a great place. And who knows what it was used for, but in this case, I managed to balance a planet up on that high shelf. And another stonework found this wall, and I put a planet, or actually one of my neighbors put planets on either side of this wall just to cover both our bases, both the Mongols and the Chinese. And I love this photo because Jane Spillman brought a planet with her. She's actually, not to single anyone out, but you have been a dedicated infinity planet person for a while. Jane took one to the Taj, and then as more and more friends would travel, I'd say, hey, could you carry a planet with you? And so some of them are left in plain sight, as this one is at the mouth of the Horton River overlooking the Arctic Ocean, or in caves, or this has always been a thing to get a planet on the summit of Mount Everest, but it turns out most of the people that go there cut off the ends of their toothbrushes. They don't want to carry a lot of weight up that hill for some reason. But I did get somebody to take one to the base camp of Everest. But in 2000, I put the Infinity Project on my website. And that has resulted in things getting pretty crazy at times. These are a bunch of kids in Guatemala, and people hiking up Mount Fuji. And, this is Ambassador Carol van Voorst, Ambassador to Iceland. She and Katie and Jamie are throwing a planet in. You can see it about to hit the confluence between the American and European tectonic plates in Iceland. And since I've had the diplomatic corps completely involved in this at different times, this is Ambassador Jean Christie, who was in the South China Sea diving and put this on the wreck of a ship that went down in World War II. And of course, the Woods Hole Oceanographic people have this great submarine called the Alvin. You can see the planet in Alvin's basket, and in the Azores. Can you pick it out? They often will break off part of a volcanic vent or something and bring that back to me as a sort of a trade. It's nice. Now, I admit that some of these planets are not going to be found right away. But, there's no reason why that shouldn't be there a long time hence. So, all right, so Jane was taking a planet with her to Greece. And I don't know if any of you, again, not to single someone out, but you are the most unlucky traveler. And And so I never did have a planet put in the Aegean Sea. And so Jane had some planets with her on the Sea Diamond, and somehow it struck something, and they got the passengers off, but not their luggage. And so, it was kind of a loss for the Sea Diamond, but it was I got my planets on the bottom of the Aegean. So another ship. This is a U.S. icebreaker that went to the North Pole. They had a little ceremony at the back of the ship and dropped planets into the water, but they also left one on the ice. And you can't. It would unbalance things not to have a planet in Antarctica, and so there's one in the Transantarctic Mountains at 12,500 feet above sea level. And Ernest Shackleton, the Arctic explorer, this is his grave on South Georgia Island. And I thought it would be fun. These monkeys were in a fort in Bundi, India. They played with this for quite a while. I did not hide this. This was somebody else who took this. But I'll show you a sort of not a totally typical hiding place, but there's a river in Colorado. And it goes through Arizona, and it's eventually cut a channel through the earth, and they call this the Grand Canyon, and it is not it's really an amazing place. But climbing up the side of this is you kind of get partway up, and you kind of go, is it really worth hiding this planet? Because you're kind of out on this little shelf, and you slip, and it's not good. But I was trying to reach an Anasazi granary. And so I got up there, and it doesn't have any grain in it anymore, but it does have a planet. Of course, I've always had a thing for the Air Force. This is actually a B-1 bomber, I got on the plane with a planet, but somehow I lost it. I don't know what happened. And of course, I love the space program, and I thought it would be great to hide them in the great moon rockets in Florida and in Texas. And so they are I'm not telling you which nozzle they're in, but they're in one of the nozzles there. And of course, this was really a challenge. This was harder than you think, except because especially if you notice carefully to the right of the American flag on the roof. Okay, these people are not friendly to people jumping the fence. And so I went through a bit of a hard time because I got invited by, I'd been part of the Art in Embassy program with the State Department for many years, 30 years. And the Bushes invited me to a brunch at the White House. And so I sat there and just tried to deal with sort of like all of my moral, political, everything versus free food. And as an artist, it's really, the free food one. And so I ended up at the White House. Now, still, you're in the White House now, and I've got a planet with me, but it's still a long road to hoe here because there's Secret Service guys all over the place. But I had a friend who was with me on this trip who distracted the Secret Service guys, chatting them up. And so keep an eye in between the two columns in the state dining room. And so, and my next most difficult project was Castel Gandolfo is the summer palace of the Pope. And so Katie and I were invited to meet the Pope. And so, again, I had high expectations because, how often do you get to meet the Pope? It's pretty rare. And so I didn't know what... I was really kind of thinking this could be a transcendent, amazing experience for me. But then, as I got closer and closer, we went through chamber after chamber with Swiss guards, and these guys have pikes and swords and all kinds of stuff. And I kept thinking, what if I actually meet the Pope, and he puts out his hand to shake my hand, and what if my hand starts to burn and shrivel? And in which case, it would have proven my mother correct for all those years. And at any rate, I did meet the Pope, and it was marvelous. And again, it was one of those things where I couldn't find the planet I had. Anyway, so we left one there. Learning how to fly has greatly enhanced my ability to hide planets. I put a window in the plane, and you guys laugh, but you know, did you ever try to break a marble when you were a kid? They're pretty tough. So I try not to drop them on populated areas. But I'm flying up, actually in a friend's plane, up the Whanganui River in New Zealand, on the North Island of New Zealand, dropping planets in the river. And then it came to me. If you want your glass to be in museums, hide your glass in museums. I don't know why it took 30 years to figure that out, but I mean, forget the archaeologists. They're, you know, so this is not a totally typical hiding, but on a Sunday morning, I hid a planet outside this office. And wouldn't you know that the director at the time, Dr. David Whitehouse, well, I don't know if you guys know this, but he's an archaeologist. So this planet was excavated at the museum and identified as the work of Josh Simpson. It is one of thousands of planets that Simpson has placed around the globe. Anyway, I thought I'd show you some pictures of my current work. This is actually in collaboration with German artist Gabriele Kunstner. And this was a piece I did in collaboration with Steuben. And a Tektite piece, and a copper basket piece. Actually, I'm trying to speed up a little bit, but I have a solemn art names that I give these pieces, and so I thought I'd tell you the name of this piece. It's called "When I Die, I Want to Go Quietly in My Sleep, the way my grandfather did, not screaming like all the passengers in his car." My latest work has been to work with colloidal silver glasses to make plates and other objects that I think look a little bit like Hubble Space Telescope imagery. And these are really fun and really frustrating to do because it's really, I'm trying to mimic a 14th or 15th century Italian chalcedonia glass, but it's more tricky than one would imagine. This is actually a Hubble Space Telescope photo and a picture of a planet. I wanted to show you this photo of my glass-making crew just to acknowledge the fact that nothing that I do is possible without a team effort. My whole studio helps, and so Rick and Jeff and Alex and, in this case, Aaron, are just immeasurably important. I also wanted to introduce you to my family. This is my youngest son, Jamie. He was 4 days old, and I felt it was important to take him on a tractor ride. Here he is a little bit older, maybe 4 or 5, jumping in the leaves, torturing our cat, Fang. And now he's 11 and in 5th grade and a race car driver. This thing goes faster than you would think. And my wife, Katie, who in 1992 applied for what was an impossible dream. And who could have ever thought that out of 2,700 applicants that they would choose 3 women for the class of 1992. Katie got to fly the Space Shuttle Columbia on a 16-day mission in 1995, STS-73, and then made a second space shuttle flight in 1999, STS-93, where she was in charge of launching the Chandra X-ray Observatory. And actually that was an interesting flight because the first female commander of a shuttle, Eileen Collins, was Katie's commander for that flight. And Eileen said to say hi to everybody. I saw her just a few days ago. And So Katie's third space flight was in December of 2010. She got to fly on a Russian Soyuz spacecraft to the International Space Station with the Russians. I throw this picture, and they did a crew picture, and which you can recognize. Actually, in the background, you may see the Mars lunar lander, or you may see the space station in the sky above this. But once NASA Legal got a hold of this photo, it became that. But anyway, I like that. So I think, yes, okay. So this is a little video of Katie, and I hope that you'll join in partway through. Those were Katie's mission patches. Katie got ready for this flight for probably 3 years before. And during that time, Jamie and I also got ready. Katie worked in Russia and in Germany and in Japan, in Canada, in Houston, and would spend an occasional day in Massachusetts when she had a moment. But she did training in the EVA suit, and where they make her neutrally buoyant. She floats and practices. She gets to sign her dormitory. She was blessed by a priest who must have loved her because he soaked her with holy water. And so we were right there in Kazakhstan in December. This is even colder than Corning, if you can imagine that. And watch little legs try to match up with big legs. Katie's trying to walk. Anyway, so they got on this rocket, and Jamie and I watched from, in the US, you have to be 3.5 miles away. We were about 3,200 feet from this rocket. It's pretty amazing. So it took off, and it was so nice once Katie reached orbit because Jamie and I knew exactly where she was.
So we're going to switch over, and I'll tell you about space. Launch only takes 8.5 minutes, and then about 2 days to dock with the space station, and then you're living in space on the space station. And this is my favorite scene, even though it shows my rear end. And that is that it's not about floating around in space, it's about flying from place to place and living in a place where flying is just a way of life. This is our Japanese supply ship, and it is flying right next to us. We are both, the space station and the supply ship, going 17,500 miles an hour. That supply ship was actually up on the space station during the Japanese tsunami, and so we actually made origami at their request for that represents hope and rebuilding for the Japanese people. It was a really sort of special and actually a tough time to be up there when a lot of our friends in Japan were under really tough circumstances. We were known as a mission that had a number of comings and goings supply ships, 3 Russian supply ships, a European supply ship, a Japanese supply ship, and a space station. So the space station is taking video of us, and we are taking video of the space station and photographs too. It was probably the most nervous I was during the whole mission. They actually do sort of a pirouette and show us the belly of the space station. We're inspecting the heat shield, and we take a series of very carefully choreographed photographs to understand the integrity of that heat shield. And basically, if you mess up the photographs, you have to take them, you can't really take them again. We have to inspect the bottom of the space station with the robotic arm, and it takes a whole day to do that. So we're just concerned to take the right photographs. But everything came out right. And that module right there, the one, it looks just like this one, they're bringing the new, the new and last piece of the International Space Station. So we're right inside there as the space shuttle docks, and you can actually kind of feel a little thunk-thunk. And now all of us are inside the space station. Our crew of 6, along with 6, or in this case 7 people on the space shuttle. This is a Space Shuttle Discovery. That was my friend Nicole. And they're out doing spacewalks. We're all actually doing work inside the space station, outside the space station. That new module was picked up by the robotic arm of the space station and put onto the space, attached to the space station and then installed. This is our new robot that is up on the space station right now, affectionately known as Robonaut. He's the one on the left. That's Scott Kelly on the right. You'll meet him in a minute. And then we're just cruising through the space station, and you'll see a little bit more of this kind of footage of just, I want you to see how big it is. This is about 8 train cars all put together, and they each have hatches in between. You can see a hatch right in back of me as I'm cutting Dima's hair there. And there's Dima and Paolo and I. Notice that our lunch table, dinner, breakfast, all the same thing, is not horizontal. When you think about it, up in space, nothing is going to stay on that table anyway. Everything is going to float away unless it's Velcroed down or even taped down or bungeed down. And so, let's see, is this, are we on the sky, Scott? Let's see. Am I doing these on the, I'm doing these down here. Okay, there we go. It was really interesting to me. Everybody on a crew is different, and we all bring different strengths and different weaknesses to the team. When we got up there, we go up in groups of 3 in that tiny, tiny Soyuz capsule. And when we got there, we, meaning Paolo Nespoli from Italy, Dmitry Kondratiev from Russia, and myself, when we got there, Scott Kelly, Sasha Kaleri, and Alex Gripochka were already there. And they'd already been there for about 2 months. They stay up there another 4 months, and then they leave. They land up back here on the Earth. And we stay up there for a little while alone, and then a new crew joins us, and again we'll be a crew of 6. And Scott may actually look familiar to you. His twin brother, identical twin brother, Mark Kelly, is also an astronaut, and he was on one of the next space shuttle missions that came up to visit us after Scott had landed. Mark Kelly is married to Gabriella Giffords, who was actually injured while we were up there. And so here's our new crew of 6. And you'll see we've been joined by new folks. This is Ron Garin, Sasha Samokuchayev, and Andrei Borishenko from Russia. So on the space station, usually 3 Russians and 3 what we call USOS, meaning United States Operating Segment. That doesn't mean all Americans. The US segment is actually made up of our partners from Japan, from Europe, from Canada. Altogether, 16 countries, including Russia, make up the International Space Station, and you see the flags on the bottom part of that picture. And so on our particular mission, we had Paolo from Italy. In my talk, you're going to see a mixture of crews, not just the ones, the folks that I was up there with, but sometimes other folks have video that I like to show. And so you'll see actually some of our Japanese crew members and folks from other countries. And I like to show you this one for 2 reasons. First, I have a very convincing husband. I think you might notice what's in the middle of the screen here. So this is my training on the Black Sea. We're doing water survival training because what if that capsule doesn't land where it's supposed to? And we realize that we need a little rescuing. And so this is Nikolai and Sasha and I. And that is, the reason I have it in there is that is how close we sit in that Soyuz. It is really, really, really tiny. Now, this picture shows all of us excited about going to space. And I show you this picture not to make fun of Dima, because obviously he's the one who's sort of not smiling and looking like he'd rather be anywhere else, but because this is a picture of Dima excited about going to space. And it's very traditional for a traditional cosmonaut, which he is, that in photographs, in official photographs, not to smile. So for Paolo and I to be, egging him on, saying, "Come on, Dima, smile," it's just not his way, and it just wouldn't be, so we had to figure out, oh, this is what Dima looks like when he's excited. So it's an international crew. It's a crew of 6 people, and I would say that anybody who is either part of a family, married, has a sweetheart, or works with more than one other person knows what it's like to be part of a crew. And all of us have to, when we have a job as big as ours, it doesn't really matter whether we like each other or would like to be up there. We don't get to pick our friends to be on our crew. We really just have to make the best of it and figure out what people bring to the team so that we can accomplish the mission, which is usually a pretty big mission. In our case, we had the first Japanese supply ship, or excuse me, the second Japanese supply ship ever to come to the space station, and we're going to grapple it. Actually, I'm at the controls, and Paolo Nespoli is judging distances, and we're doing it as a team. So we're going to grab that with the space station robotic arm. And it looked small in that picture, but in this picture, you can tell it is big. It is one big thing. We did a lot of robotics operations. I'm somebody who's sort of maybe known for robotics, or at least has done a lot of it back there at the Johnson Space Center. And so it was really great for me to go from being in charge of robotics for the astronaut office without having actually, gotten to operate the arm to operating all the arms on the space station. I was just in heaven. We also do spacewalks. In our particular case, the space shuttle astronauts did the spacewalks. We just wished for something to break outside where we would have to go out and fix it. But no. One night we did actually have a very good alarm where it went off in the middle of the night. We all flew down to the main computer, looked at the computer screen, and Scott looked up and he says, "Yes, it's a box out on S0. We're going to have to go." Turns out, being NASA, we always think, what if this happens? What if this happens? What if that happens? We had a spare box out on S0, and all they had to do was reroute the data and the power. No fun. No spacewalk. But a lot of different kinds of adventures. I showed this picture to the kids today to have them realize that I grew up not knowing how to use tools, and I learned how to use tools when I was, in my late 40s. And it turns out using tools, not that hard. Fixing things, not that hard. I mean, in my family, we always just called people and they came over and they fixed things. But on the space station, that's a problem. And so it turns out if you follow the directions, gentlemen, it's just not that hard. You'll notice I think having the right accessories is really important. You'll notice my nuts and bolts earrings for fixing things. And we do a lot of science experiments up there. I'm just going to run through really quickly to just kind of give you a taste of why we might go up there. I mean, this is me doing a fluids experiment. Down here on the ground, we don't get to understand what do liquids really want to do, because gravity is this overwhelming force, and there's a lot of really tiny, small forces like surface tension that affect them very much, and it affects a lot of important processes like, well, extracting oil out of the ground is going to be, all those forces at the interface of the oil and the ground are important. There's fluid in our body. We have pipes in our body. Flow through, anything that is made using flow through a pipe is going to be affected by these small forces that are difficult to measure and are often sort of a fudge factor in equations, but up in space without gravity they become the dominant force, and we can really learn a lot about them. This is just a little film that's going to show you just a little bit about the science that we do up there. This is some shear viscosity experiment. So we're having these big streams of liquid which would be falling on the ground here on Earth, but up in space they're actually liquid. We have high temperature furnaces where we grow semiconductor crystals and different kinds of alloys. This is Satoshi with a freezer. We store a lot of biological samples. Those samples usually come from us. We are looking at our own health, partly because we'd like to understand what happens to people up in space, and we want to understand how to keep people safe on a longer mission and further away, like up to Mars, but also because those lessons come straight back to Earth. Our hearts actually degrade in a certain way that is very similar to aging, and yet we'll have very sort of normal medical histories, and those effects happen fast, so they're easy to measure. The same with osteoporosis. Let's see what else we've got here. This is Scott working on one of the experiments. So just a lot of different things from all the different countries. This one's from Japan, and this is Paolo doing an experiment understanding how the brain really works in a microgravity kind of environment. Now we can grow crystals that are more perfect up there. You'll notice on the left is the sort of ugly Earth crystal, and on the right is the beautiful space crystal. Being able to grow things more perfectly up there gives us a supply of crystals back here on the Earth to do things like protein crystallography, which is used to understand the structure of proteins to then do drug design. This is a really cool combustion experiment. You'll notice the flame is round. Isn't that cool? But this is the cool part is yet to come. So we think the flame is done. We think burning is done, and we understand combustion. And now this bright glow here was totally unexpected. And they're still trying to understand, when they thought all the fuel was depleted and they thought they understood the combustion process, what is burning now? So there's things that we can understand, especially with combustion, the measurements that we can make, and we have to make in less than a second down here on the Earth. We can actually make those measurements over 30 or 40 seconds up in space, because it's a less dynamic process up there. Down here with that candle flame shape, it's caused by those light gases, those products, actually rising like a hot air balloon down here on the Earth, and then new fuel is coming in. It's a very dynamic, this is coming in, this is going out. It's hard to measure, whereas in space, where that happens in a little sphere like that, and new fuel is not rushing in, we can understand more about combustion and more about how to burn things differently, different aspects of pollution. Different aspects of even metal alloys, trying to understand if we mix two different things together, if one of them is heavier than the other. These little granules here are heavier. Where'd they go? Let's see. These are heavy. On Earth, it's going to look like this, but in space, it could be evenly distributed. We're not going to have a factory up in space anytime soon, but we can understand what if we can make these kinds of materials, bring them back to Earth, understand the properties, and understand whether these are worthy goals for even a place right here like Corning, which has a really, I think, great R&D program and is continued to have one despite tough economic times. Some of the things that happen up on the space station come back to Earth in different ways. The water processing system turns out to be very useful for processing water in places where they don't have clean water, maybe in emergencies like hurricanes and other natural disasters, and also just in places where there's not enough clean water. This is an astronomical instrument that's on the outside of the space station, and this is a picture, but it's actually based on the interpretation of this data here. Basically, in space, astronomers were looking, nothing was happening in this particular place, and then a black hole swallowed a star. This is a star being ingested by a black hole, and a jet is streaming out. And that's actually what the kind of data they get from the difference between these two pictures not happening here and star being ingested there. It's really pretty neat stuff. We do a lot of human experimentation. I mean, nothing bad, but just understanding what happens to us. We're human guinea pigs. We get to volunteer for those things, but we do a lot of volunteering. One of my favorite examples is osteoporosis, in that it's something that affects many, many women. And up in space, it turns out we lose bone at the rate of 10 times the rate that a woman who is 70 years old and has osteoporosis does. So what she loses in a year, I lose in a month up there in terms of bone and muscle. So it happens really fast, and that's the bad news. The good news is that it's really measurable, and that we can do some really interesting experiments about nutrition and about exercise to understand what are ways that we can prevent this kind of bone loss. And I can't speak for other people's data, but for myself, this is a new exercise machine that we have up there that allows us to do a really large range of motion for exercise. And we've got a treadmill, we have a bike. Doing those things and also taking a drug that's commonly used for osteoporosis, I came back with the same amount of bone that I left with. It's a phenomenal result. Now, that doesn't mean we're ready to publish papers. The problem with space research is that N, meaning the number of samples, is usually quite low. But we're certainly, I think, at least on a pretty hopeful track, and it's pretty interesting data. It doesn't mean that my bones are actually the same. We'll go on a little tour here while I explain. But first, let me just, before we do that, I'll just show you. This is our treadmill. It doesn't look like the treadmill until we turn sideways. Now it looks like the treadmill. So here in node 3, this is where we do a lot of the basic things that we need to do. These are the bungee cords that are going to hold you on that treadmill. And this is the place you're going to run. This is the TV you're going to watch, because you're going to do this for about an hour every day. And it's really helpful to have something to do. This, of course, is the bathroom. It's our outhouse. And now we're going to look in the bathroom. It's going to look bad in there. Get ready. Look at that. This is an engineering feat. Now, we do, in this case, have the bathroom taken apart, okay, and just dismantled because we're replacing a bunch of different parts. Josh actually got me a position as a ski lift mechanic once I came home, so, and when I'm not allowed to call the plumber or the electrician now that I'm home. But this is the bathroom, a pretty complicated engineering marvel, completely necessary. When that thing breaks, which it does, then everything stops and we fix it. Now we're coming to the weightlifting machine. The weights, of course, are not heavy, and we're going to have to turn upside down for that to make some sense. So this is the place we're going to stand, but it doesn't really make sense until you turn your head around and realize that now we're going to stand on this platform, and then we're going to use this bar to lift weights. It's actually a resistance-based system. And then right above our heads, in the most ideal place imaginable for weightlifting, so we're going to look up, 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 and you're going to see the cupola module. So this is where we go to look out the window from the space station. Now, we used to only have literally portals. These are windows where you're looking and the world just kind of goes by. But now we have a cupola module where the windows are actually on all sides and on the top. It feels like the top, but actually this is on the bottom of the space station facing the Earth. And so all of those are windows. And that is our view. And it's just simply amazing. So those are clouds and ocean. There's a lot of clouds and ocean. Actually, that's a little atoll right there. And it makes me a little homesick, really, just to see this. You can see it's pretty challenging light. It's actually very bright out when it's sunny. So there's the Earth. And we're just going to take a little spin around. You can see some of our robotics there. And I think you get a feel for what it's like. I'm just adjusting the camera so it's not so bright out. You get a feel for what it really looks like when we look out, which, you know, we go around the Earth every hour and a half. So 45 minutes of daylight, 45 minutes of sun. These are our solar arrays collecting energy. Our radiators, those white things, are rejecting heat. And you're going to see our rescue vehicle. So right here, this is the ship that I came up in. And then this is a supply ship. So every time I look out the window, I see my rescue ship, which is pretty cool. So it's really just a totally amazing place. This is our big closet module. And you'll see some of these things from the inside as well. And I'm just actually spinning in the middle of the cupola showing you all of this. And now we're looking at the other parts of the space station, but we're looking at them from the outside, even though we're on the inside of the station. And that's some parts of our robotic arm built by the Canadians. That's the Dexter, which is a really cool little special robot. Okay, let's see if let me just see. No, we did that. Okay, food. This is about, we'll just do real quickly some living in space. The food looks sad. The food repeats itself every 9 days. The same menu. Doesn't mean you're going to eat the same thing for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. There's actually lots of food, and you can pick. But the good thing about the food is that the food is fun. Even eating is a science experiment up there. Isn't that just great? So living up there is a challenge, okay? How to keep track of more than two things. I mean, you really can't hold on to, you can have your feet sort of tucked in somewhere to hold you in one place. And then you could have, one thing in each hand and maybe one thing under each arm. But pretty soon you start to be pretty constrained. And so I wanted to show you just a few minutes of what living in space is like. This is Mike Fossum running on the treadmill. And Satoshi Furukawa, that was Satoshi getting weighed. Mike is taking a bath. We don't actually take any showers. We could. It's physically possible. But it's just so much to clean up. Everybody just takes sponge baths. There's climbing into your sleeping bag. Actually, Mike took my place on the mission, so he's actually, he has his own sleeping bag, but he's climbing into my cabin. We each have our own sleeping bags. We each have our own place, our own little cabin. And then this is the water processor. And the guys are eating onions. I was glad I wasn't up there for that. And then another view of the cupola. And this is cool. Now, it's going to look like they are moving. And now you're going to see Sergey. And he's parking himself. And he's going to let himself go. And you'll see that he is not touching anything. Okay, he is completely free. And it looks like he is moving. But actually, the station is moving. Well, now, this is fun. This is Satoshi. We have to have a little fun up there, right? We don't have enough for a baseball team, so sometimes we have to play all by ourselves. So. He hits. He scores. Does he catch the ball? It's a pop fly. Let's see, does he have the ball? Yes. And I show you, it's kind of silly stuff, but first of all, it's just magical up there. It's magical to fly from place to place and to live in a place like this where all the rules are different. And some of the flying takes practice. But for a scientist, it's just like, it's amazing. I mean, all this sort of daily living stuff is like a science experiment as well. Washing your hair, you just put water on your head. We have no rinse shampoo. The toilet, I wanted to show you a little bit about what the toilet is like. Because, you're going to go home and your kids will want to know, right? So let's see. Let's see if this, yep, it started. And so I actually just want to show you one thing. Really, we're going to go back for a second. I just wasn't fast enough here. So this is going. This is the urine hose. So this yellow funnel, appropriate color, how imaginative. This yellow funnel's on the top of the urine hose, and there's the rest of the toilet. And so we use that hose. There's a funnel on the top, and everybody just pees into that. It works out just fine. We have a fan that is drawing all the airflow and everything else down there. And then this is our commode. And I did actually my first little movie of it, because we always talk about it. We never show it. And I did my first little movie out of it showing granola bars. Much too graphic. Very graphic. Bad idea. I mean, it's impossible to control the 8-year-olds who are watching granola bar chunks, you know. That's a bad thing. But you can see that the airflow that is coming through the plastic bag there. So we have our plastic bags. It's stretched around this the lip of this thing here. And there's holes in the bottom, which is kind of counterintuitive, because you'd think with all that yucky stuff in there, you don't want a hole in the bag, but actually you need the holes for the airflow. So all the yucky stuff goes in there, including all your paper and everything. When you're done, you're going to pull up on that little red tab. The rubber band closes itself up, just goes shroop. And now you have a little bag. You poke it down in the bottom there, and there's a can that collects all that stuff. And that stuff we do not actually recycle. We do, however, it grosses the kids out, but we do actually recycle everything else. All the water, condensate, sweat, stuff that dries out, all that stuff, and all the urine gets recycled. And I tell the kids it goes right down that tube in behind the panel and gets processed, and then we drink it. And they hate that. But you know, down here we have water treatment plants. It's just they're a little further from your home, and you don't have to fix them if they break. Just a few lighter notes here at the end. I know we're running over time here, but you know, we're people, and all of us are different, and everybody's got their own neat hobbies. One of the guys who's up there right now, Don Pettit, is one of my favorite folks. In fact, his wife and I play music together quite a lot. And Don is known for Saturday morning science, and I urge you to go to the web, look up Saturday morning science, and you will see the geekiest, most lovable guy you could imagine doing science experiments that I just would never even dream of. Even just simple things like, okay, so we have a water bubble and an Alka-Seltzer tablet. I wonder what'll happen if we put this tablet inside the water bubble, and it zings around, and it's really cool. A lot of really neat thin film experiments. So Don does that in his spare time. And I did a lot of education projects, and I also did a lot of music. And so here I am with some of my buddies from the shuttle crew. This is Drew Foystel, and who's playing guitar, and Box Johnson, who plays keyboards. And this got a lot of play on the internet, but I got to bring a few things with me up to space. And one of them, I'm a flute player, so I brought 4 flutes up there. This is one of them. One was mine, and one belongs to Ian Anderson of Jethro Tull. So we are playing a duet between Earth and space. So those of you may remember him with longer hair back then. He's the kindest, funniest, most interesting guy. And you know, for some reason, this duet on the internet has really brought home to a lot of people that we really live up there. You know, people, regular people who have hobbies, who maybe aren't amazing flute players, but just plain old like to play. There's nobody to play with up there, so we figured out how to play together down here as well.
Thanks, Colonel Catherine Coleman in the International Space Station. We should remember that today's cosmonaut scientist.
And to bring something up here to space. You're actually the first to see this clip. That would remind me of my Irish heritage. And since I'm a flute player, I thought, what better than Irish flutes? So I asked the chieftains if they would mind if I took some of their instruments on a little business trip. And I have up here this beautiful, lovely E-flat flute from Matt Malloy. It's made of wood, made about 100 years ago, and it's just a beautiful, beautiful flute. And I also have a tin whistle from Paddy Maloney, also of the Chieftains. And I've loved having this up here as well. It fits in my pocket, so I can carry it around with me, and I can play whenever I have a spare minute. And seeing these flutes float around up here in the space station is just marvelous, and especially, I think, looking at Matt's flute, it's a beautiful mix of the old and the new. I'm not sure that Patty and Matt understood that their flutes would be taking such a long journey. I don't think I mentioned that it would be 6 months, and that the flutes would have traveled about, well, several million miles by the time they returned home. About 63 million miles. So just a few views of the Earth from space, because I thought of y'all when I was here, when I was up there, and you'll see why in a minute. Here's our cupola module. And this is not myself, but Tracy Caldwell looking out at the Earth from the cupola. I think it's a very, I don't know, I like it just shows, you know, humans and their relationship to the Earth, and how you could build a spaceship and a space station and people could live up there, but it wouldn't be the same if they couldn't look out and still have a relationship with the places that they come from or the places that they're going to. We took a lot of pictures, about 60,000. And I was glad for some places that have really recognizable geography. Italy, indeed shaped like a boot. And this video, I just like to, it's just a short portion of a longer thing that's on the internet, but everything that you see that's a yellow light is actually a city light. And when we first, and all the little white flashes that you'll see are actually lightning. And when we first went up to space, we would actually just go and look out at night because it was easier to figure out where you were because you could see sort of city by city by city, as opposed to just seeing sort of a lot of Earth that was sort of the same color. You'll see what I mean in a minute. Here we are going over the US. And so we're actually going, we're starting out, I want to say that's California. And then we're just going over, and you can see a lot of things just kind of look a little bit the same, different cities. We're actually just over the middle of the country. There's the Great Lakes up there. And so sometimes, I mean, you look at this, it's a little bit hard to know where you are. So in the beginning, it was actually nice to be able to look out at night. And this is a very good day to be looking at this video. This is Aurora Australis, meaning northern lights in the southern hemisphere. So we call it Aurora Australis as opposed to Aurora Borealis. And today is one of the days when it's the highest solar activity that we've seen in a number of years. And so the guys up in space, I think, are probably taking fabulous pictures. But that little video there, and you can find it on the internet, it's a video that Peter Gabriel made, or it's our video from the space station, but he put music to it. And it just shows you, I think, the closest we've ever been able to show you in terms of what it looks like when we look out at the Earth, except something I should have mentioned was that it's really fast, it's sped up. This is actually stop-action photography. It's not video, but stop-action photography to get that night video. And so it's much faster than we go around the Earth. But we do go around pretty fast, and I like coming from someplace from Massachusetts. It's very recognizable. I flew with a guy from Massachusetts, and when we first saw Massachusetts from space, he looked down, he went, "Oh my gosh, it looks just like the map." And this is the same place, but just different perspectives. And, you know, you'd see it coming, and then you'd be there, and then you'd see it going. And just, you know, some interesting detail as well. This is Long Island and New York City and the Hudson River, and you're over this way. We'll get to that. And I think, actually, I might have put these slides in here twice, yeah. And then now you're going to see another view. There's Cape Cod. This is the Quabbin Reservoir, and again, y'all are up there. So just different angles and different ways to look at it. This is the one I wanted you to see. Isn't that great? So the Finger Lakes, and I thought, oh, you know, I probably don't have Corning in that picture, and it turns out I do. So this is Lake Cucut. Yep. And if you follow things down, you'll see that you are right in here. And actually, when I zoomed in on this photograph, I could actually see the airport in Elmira. Isn't that great? And now the same area, but in a different kind of light. So now the lake's on the bottom. How did that happen? Well, it just depends which direction you're coming from. Right side up, a little more detail. And let's see. So the meeting of Earth, space, art, and science. You know, when I look at different pieces of the Earth and they're blown up really big, it's hard to know sometimes whether I'm looking at one of Josh's pieces or one of my very own photographs. And you know, actually, I mean, I had a great time, actually. I don't get to listen to him talk. And I'm like, this man is a nut. I am married to a nut. Who's really lovable. But, you know, I love the imagination that would just decide, you know, maybe there's a lot of volcanoes on that planet. I mean, it's just amazing. So, of course, when we only get to bring a few things up for our family, of course, I bring planets, partly because they just look like they're supposed to be there. The other more logistical reason is that if you actually ask your siblings and your parents what they would like you to bring to space for them, I mean, that discussion could go on for months and months and months, and then they would send it late. And so, and let's say my younger brother wanted to send his dog Willie, and it's a new puppy. And then Josh said, well, if Willie gets to go, couldn't I bring my riding lawnmower? And, you know, the list just went on. So, well, sooner or later, it's time for landing. Our crew climbed in our little spaceship, took pictures of the space station. If you ever see pictures like this where you see the shuttle attached to the station, Paolo Nespoli and our crew took those pictures as we undocked. It's the only time we've undocked during a shuttle attached to the station. And then we're ready for the wild ride home. Scott Kelly likes to say that this is like going over Niagara Falls in a barrel, on fire, followed by a head-on collision. It's really pretty amazing. But it all works out. We're sitting in seats that are molded to our backsides. We're in a capsule that's designed to look just like that. Charred, I mean, I'm serious, charred on one side, and just enough charred, but not too much. That's just what you want. And they know exactly where we're going to land. I tell the kids they know because they do math. Math is important, right? And so they were right there to meet us. I think maybe 5 minutes after I was out of the capsule, I was talking to Josh and Jamie and Josiah on the phone. And this is, we're minus my stepson who's 28, but our family back home. You know, it's nice to see a view like you saw some of these views of the Earth, but it's nice to be back home and be part of the view and right in the middle of the view as well, especially when it's the one out the back door of the studio. So beautiful. And we get to do some, you know, kind of fancy things. You know, we got to our crew and the shuttle crew. So you're seeing actually both myself and Paolo, and this is Scott Kelly and Mark Kelly, because it was Mark's shuttle crew and then our station crew that got to go. And actually standing a little further out and also in pictures was Josh, so we got to go together. So we get to do some fancy things. And yes, I was worried about the Pope thing, you know. I flew with Paolo Nespoli from Italy, and we were visited by a space shuttle with Roberto Vittori, so 2 Italians in space at the same time. We had a conference with the Pope and then did get to have an audience with him when we got home. And I get to do some special things. This is Sandra Day O'Connor's scarf that I brought up to space. She's known for her kitchen diplomacy. Civil talk leads to civic action. She used to gather people in her kitchen together and make them figure things out. And so I brought this scarf up there to our kitchen and actually sliced off a little piece of it, a little corner, kept our corner up there so that we can have kitchen diplomacy when we need it up on the space station. But when you do these kinds of wild things, you never do them alone. And Marie and I were talking about how it takes a village, and it takes many people to support you. And so Josh is at home doing, you know, what Josh does, which is amazing, as only Josh can do it, you know. And you know, I'm really lucky to be married to a guy that understands and loves rockets maybe even more than I do. We're sitting inside a shuttle main engine. A certifiable nut who I'm crazy about. And this is us. You're not allowed to actually do any smooching before launch, so we didn't. We're in quarantine. And I left behind our little guy who was 10 at the time and now 11. And, you know, just wonder how he's going to do. And just, you know, I know he's got a great dad, and his dad pays a lot of attention, but you're the mom, so you have to worry. But then I remembered Fang. Remember Fang the cat? Okay, so Fang is a really amazing cat. There's only one kind of discrepancy, and that is that Fang doesn't understand that he's not a dog. And so Jamie is his human, and I'm confident that he was keeping Jamie in his sights. Jamie's writing in his journal, which his dad has him do almost every single day. So I never had to worry about Jamie because he had a dad and he had Fang. And I showed this picture to the kids for them to think about being curious and asking questions, but I show it to you so that you remember that all of us should remember how it feels to look like this, or how it feels to feel like this, because it's what we need to remember to take care of the kids who are the future. You know, these kids need to be ready for the future, and getting ready involves being really inspired about studying all the things that we talk about: engineering, math, science, all those things, technology, but also art, music, all the things that will make them whole people are the things that we need, because this is the future. We've got new capsules and new spaceships and amazing adventures to go on. So with that, I will say thank you for having Josh and I. Corning is always like home for us. So for me, it's like coming back to tell your hometown how it was to go on your great adventure. So thank you very much.
It's great. It's up to you. It's up to you.
I know that we would probably stay here all night if we take a lot of questions. So I think we're only going to take a couple, and I'll let Josh and Katie decide what they want to do. But, you know, I have a million questions, but of course, I'm going to let the audience go first.
Okay, questions? Anybody? Over there? Sharks. Sharks. We're worried about sharks. Actually, either one, the water is just like land at that in terms of how hard it is. With those speeds, it's just like land. And the new capsule will actually land in the water. And so it's just a question. I mean, either one work, and it just depends where you land. But in general, to line up with the Russian ground sites, we land on land in Kazakhstan, same place that we took off from.
I think in the 60s, the Russians didn't have easy land places that were,
Water.
or water places that they thought were safe. The Americans did.
Yep, that's true too.
Other questions? Down the front?
Question for Josh, as an archaeologist myself.
The question is, have any of my planets been discovered? And the answer is yes, actually. I can tell you one or two. One was relayed to me by some folks who went to visit friends who had climbed Mount Denali in Alaska. And they had a planet in the center of their kitchen table. And my friend said, well, that's a Josh Simpson planet. And they said, oh, that's what that thing is, because I never signed them. It just has just for legal reasons, I never put my name on the thing. And so it's just an infinity symbol. And so they had found it on Denali. And another time, I was at 130 feet underwater scuba diving when I left a planet in a cave. And literally, a couple of days later, I was on another dive boat, and this woman took this and was showing it to people on the boat, this thing that she'd found. I just kept mum. But so there have been many have been found. Some have been just put in, although I don't always hear about it. Other question? You've got a cool hairband on. I really would like to get to the summit of Everest. That's a challenge. It's always been a challenge to get one into space, but
you know, I wasn't actually the first person to bring a planet to space. Can you imagine? I did get to marry him, but actually, you know, astronauts have loved his planets long before I started to work there. And so I think Tom Jones was probably the first one to bring one of your planets up.
Actually, there was a woman in the 80s whose name just escapes me. But
I know who you mean, yeah.
Anyway.
So he's got an in when it comes to space.
So yeah, there are other places I'd love to go, but some of them are just esoteric to hide them.
Are you completely retired? Would you like to fly again?
No, she doesn't want to fly anymore.
You know, you'd think that when you came home after doing something like that, you'd just be done. I would have stayed another 6 months in a minute. And we'd actually even talked about it since, you know, it's always a little bit of a possibility. And mostly because the hard part is getting ready. And not that there's so much to know. I probably know most of that stuff now. But it's 3 years of going around the world, you know, a month in Russia and 2 weeks in Europe and 3 weeks back in Houston, but not in Massachusetts. And, I was actually really relieved to be on the space station and not in an airport.
But Katie's back in line, so
I'm back in line. I'm retired from the Air Force a while ago, so I'm a civilian who works for NASA, and I am back in line to fly. The line is kind of long. We'll see what happens.
Do you have the opportunity to fly any type of aircraft now?
Part of my training and that I'm actually required to do is to fly in these T-38.
Required, she has to fly.
We have to fly. On these T-38 jets, those little twin-engine jets that they use in the Air Force to train pilots. As an Air Force chemist, I get to fly those. It's very cool.
It actually has wingspans smaller than my Piper Comanche. But it's interesting to note here at this point, the speed at which Katie lifts the nose of her plane off the runway, not yet airborne, but the nose off the air, is exactly the same speed that the wings would rip off my plane if I were going straight down.
Okay, in the back there. Oh, definitely. I mean, it's beautiful at night. It's actually a little challenging to get all the lights to go away. I mean, there's a lot of things. Every computer has a little green light and things like that. And so it takes a little effort, but it is amazingly beautiful to look out at night and see the stars. And they move so fast because we're moving fast. Absolutely. It's amazingly beautiful.
Another question, somebody over here? Yes.
They're being published. Many of them are in the process of being published. It's a really exciting time on the space station in that we've been building it for years and years, and finally it is built, and we used to have only 3 people up there building it, doing spacewalks, all those kinds of things. Now we have 6 people up there basically doing experiments plus some maintenance that has to be done. And so we've gotten a lot of really interesting results so far, and now, it's open season. And open season in terms of having different folks have opportunities to get experiments up there. The space station is a national laboratory, and they've set up some mechanisms to be able to give more scientists access to space, which I think is very exciting. You had a question.
When you were up in space, have you ever seen a hurricane fly?
Have we ever seen
Did you guys hear that? Have you ever
hurricanes?
heard or seen a hurricane in the air?
Yes, they're really clear, actually. You see them and they just look like giant swirls, and they're unmistakable. And you look down and you just think, oh, people are having a really hard time underneath that storm.
Yes?
The shuttle program finished. What's your guess about what's next?
So quickly, because I think we're running pretty short of time, we have retired the space shuttle. So you might hear that the program is over, but it's just that the space shuttle is not flying as it was time. It's old, it's expensive. It did amazing things like build the space station and bring a lot of different kinds of people to space, but the shuttle is retired, and that leaves NASA free to do what NASA is supposed to do, exploration, doing things we don't know how to do. So the things we do know how to do, like bringing stuff up and down to space, people up and down to space, we have turned over to our commercial partners, and we are doing that in tandem with them, with companies like SpaceX, Sierra Nevada, Orbital, Blue Origin. They're all building vehicles, and they'll be flying. Actually, SpaceX will be flying any month now. And in the meantime, NASA is building a new vehicle or designing a new vehicle to go back to the moon and to go on to Mars, to go beyond low Earth orbit. Should we take this one little girl?
Katie's current job is she's in charge of the commercial contractors, that is from NASA's, from the astronaut office, for the people who are building other spacecraft. Yes?
Now and then we hear about vehicles dropping out of orbit and back to Earth. And so I wonder about the space station. Does the orbit degrade? How do you move it to a higher?
So the orbit of the space station does degrade, and we're actually constantly sort of spiraling back to Earth, closer and closer and closer. But it takes a really long time. And in the meantime, what we do is these supply ships bring up supplies, but also fuel. And they have engines, and that's and they're attached at a certain place on the space station where they can actually speed up the space station and then keep it up in orbit again. So we call it reboosting up to a higher altitude. And in fact, that's what was happening when Sergei was staying in one place. It looked like he moved, but actually the station moved. It was a reboost when the station starts going faster because the engines are firing.
My instinct is that we've already run, I think, a half hour late. It's
Wow.
okay? It's
We
okay?
appreciate everybody hanging in there and being patient.
I do have one more thing,
Ooh.
and that is, and I'm glad I didn't forget, but I had these little cue cards. In your seat, on your seat that flips up, is a number. Okay, and so I brought some infinity planets with me.
So do they have to get up and...
But I was going to tape them underneath your seats, and I was so bummed out because it's impossible to hide a planet. So if you have M107, I brought 10 planets. H111.
Wait.
Okay, so M107.
Do you know where in their seats we
I don't know. H111. F109. K105. J110. K9.
So wait a second. Are people actually going to find cards, or is it just their seat number?
No, just your
Just your
seat number.
seat
You have to
number.
be honest. You can come up afterwards. A115, D14, B108. Has no one found these numbers?
So
And
it's,
H116.
so it's not something you find. You just look at your seat number, and it'll tell you that you're the person, right?
Okay, I can read them all again. I'm sorry, this may have caused more confusion than it's worth. A115, D14, B108, H116, K9, J110, K105, F as in Frank, 109, H111, and M107.
Are you planet people?
Come on up. Thank you, everyone.